the makeup of the state legislature has to change or nothing is going to improve.
There have been no indicators that I'm aware of, and I don't know about my chums, but I've seen nothing to indicate that it's going to get any better, that the state of affairs will continue to deteriorate as we face more and more challenges with everything that we're talking about.
I don't see the funding changing unless there's a major change in the makeup of the legislature.
I see the property tax caps and is having a bigger and bigger impact, so I think it's going to get better, or get worse, excuse me, going to get more severe, and because we're all going to see the impacts of the property tax cap.
That movie that we're referring to, this Rise Above the Mark, it very aptly makes the metaphor that, you know, public education is filled with these little termites that are eating away at the foundation, from loss of funds to school choice to vouchers to property tax caps to a lack of concern about can they provide public transportation. You know, many schools are going to increasing fees for participation in anything and everything. So all these things are eating away, and as Mike is saying, eventually this perfect storm, things are going to start collapsing, and you know, very negative things are going to start happening, and hopefully people in the general public will recognize this before it gets to that point. But you know what? The public voted in Glenda Ritz. They put Tony Bennett out. There has to be more of that at the polls, as has been said, to start getting a message that you can't just continue to ignore public education this way. And any candidates who run for office have got to be put on the spot to say, what's your position on public education? And that's got to be out there for people to see and hopefully influence people at the polls. You know, that varies across the state depending whether you're Democratic region, Republican region, whatever. But still, regardless of party, people need to be put on the spot as to where they stand on these public education issues.
There are great things going on in the districts every one of us is associated with, and we are continuing to get less and less, and yet we still produce. And I think people take it for granted. But I think I'm concerned, as I'm sure all of my colleagues are, that we've reached the point where we can't continue to be successful if they keep cutting. And as Tony alluded to, the termites eating away at the infrastructure. We simply can't produce with less and less. The expectations are more and more. Our kids deserve more and more. Our legislators, our state has to wake up.
I wonder often, why is there not more of a reaction to what we're talking about this morning? Is it because there's a lack of knowledge, or is there disbelief that this is all reality? And a concern I have is one day this is all going to be like the perfect storm, and by that time it's, you know, we're really in dire straits. Yeah. Kids have so many different needs today than they did 40 years ago. Families have different needs today than they had 40 years ago. In fact, the definition of a family today is dramatically different than it was 40 years ago. Sure. And we're charged with the responsibility of meeting all those needs. Yet, with the discussion that you're hearing this morning, the resources that we identify as necessary to meet those needs are basically non-existent. Cut after cut after cut, as well as, in my case, our special needs population continues to increase, yet the resources are the same. You know, do more with the same. There's something wrong with that.
But the one thing that probably bothers me more than anything is that, did we leave anybody behind? You know, we're charged to educate every single kid. and to make them successful. And that's extremely important. Is there a kid out there that could have been another Apple computer, Steve Jobs? Is there anybody out there that could have been that? Because we didn't give them the programs that student needed. We didn't give them the right encouragement to get into those programs. Those are the kinds of things that we as educators have got to look at and constantly look at, is that we can't leave those kids behind. We got to move them forward. I think the corporation has probably done the best job that I've ever seen of not letting kids behind as Merrillville. And I'm not saying that because Tony's sitting there. But through all the changes that's happening in that school district, the amount of progress that they have made, and they're not leaving kids behind there. And we need to get that out in the papers. We need to show people that there are a lot of good things happening in public education that just doesn't get publicized, and we can't leave those kids behind. We got to get to every single kid and move them forward in a positive direction.